we are just waiting for the chat and everything to load in before we get started. We're just going to give it a minute while everything gets rolling and people filter in and all that jazz, because that always takes a minute. We want to make sure we are actually live. We want to make sure we are actually live before we actually get started. Because you never know. Are you live? Are you not live? Hard to tell. Hard to tell. Okay. I think we're good. I think we're getting there. Excellent. It just takes a minute. So if you're waiting to bake along, maybe preheat your oven to 350. We will mention 350 again. But if you are waiting to bake along and you want to preheat your oven, 350 is where we're at. All right. In fact, my oven is about to eat to tell me that it is preheated. Anyway, what we're going to do now is get started in just a minute here. Okay, did I remember to melt the butter? Yes. Butter. Do I have butter melted? I do not have butter melted. Okay, I'm going to have to get butter and melt it because I don't have melted butter. I don't think. I do not think I have melted butter. I have vanilla. Yeah, I don't have any melted butter. So I have to melt butter. So that is all. There goes the oven. It's preheated. Okay, I have to melt some butter. Anyway, welcome back. I also don't have the microphone pinned to me. It was turned on, but not pinned to me. There we go. Fixed it. There's always a few glitches when you're getting started. So we're going to need to melt some butter in a minute. That's fine. Here's the butter. Okay, so let's get started. Welcome back to Andersen Acres. This is the second week, okay, the second week of the month, which means we're in the kitchen live baking. And usually, we make something homestead style. We talk about food, ingredients, and the cozy kitchen magic that comes with living in the country and not wanting to go to the store and buy stuff. That's basically, So today we're making something warm, gooey, and a little bit magical. We're making incredible chocolate pudding cake. Because, why did I pick this one? Okay, that's important to know. Why did I pick this one? The reason I picked it is because somebody asked me about making a cake. They wanted me to make my favorite cake. And I actually don't really like cake. Perfectly honest, I don't love cake. Okay? I simply do not. I'm not a fan. So because I'm not a fan of cake, I had to think long and hard. What is my favorite cake? And I actually do like chocolate pudding cake. I think chocolate pudding cake is fantastic. So I figured I would pick chocolate pudding cake because it's completely yummy and one of my favorite things. So if you've never had it before, it's kind of a soft butter-like cake. I'm just going to melt this. But just a soft buttery cake that creates its own sauce while it's cooking. Okay? It cooks and it creates this delicious sauce all on its own. It's excellent. It's wonderful. So it's not difficult, but it's kind of like witchcraft, the good kind, and it's not difficult at all. As always, feel free to ask questions as the chat goes on. I will try to get to your questions. The questions I didn't get to last month, I did put on my e-reader here. So I'll mostly answer those while the cake is baking. So once the cake's in the oven, we will answer a bunch of questions, okay? I do have the questions that I didn't get to because I often don't get to them all. I kind of, I can't live stream forever. I'm kind of limited into how long I'm going to be live streaming. So I also can't live stream later in the day. Okay. I know. People have asked that before. Can I live stream later in the day? I cannot. Anyway, let's get started. We are going to make our chocolate pudding cake by preheating our oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. I've already done that part. Okay? Don't skip it. You have to start with a preheated oven. I know there's a lot of, you go online and people talk about, well, I never preheat. I always preheat. When you're cooking, preheating might not be the most essential part. When you are baking, that temperature is really specific and things need to start cooking at a really specific temperature. So you have to preheat your oven. Preheat it for longer than your preheat cycle. So our preheat cycle on our oven is 6 minutes. It's not even close to warm enough at 6 minutes, or at least not as consistent as you need. Double it. So that's why I had it starting already. I didn't want to start it now. But you need that temperature to create the sauce. If you put your cake in a cold oven and then turn on the heat, the sauce will just, the water in the sauce will just absorb into the cake and you'll just end up with kind of a sticky cake instead of a chocolate pudding cake. And since we're not making a sticky cake, we're making a chocolate pudding cake, we have to follow the directions. Okay, now we need a pan. We are looking at, you know, something about this big, a square pan, a smaller size square pan. And we are going to grease it. You can use your favorite method of greasing. I'm literally just using cooking spray. It doesn't matter. No, we don't make the cooking spray here on the farm. I don't care. It's okay to go to the store sometimes. It's just, you know, grease your pan. It's a sticky cake. If you don't grease your pan, you are going to regret it. So, pop this over here. Okay. I'm also, I don't know where the remote for the light ahead of me is. I'm going to turn the light on. It's actually getting dark outside. It might rain. So, lights. Lights, camera, action. There we go. We have lights. Okay, dry ingredients first. We have in this bowl 1 cup of flour. Okay, that's 1 cup of flour. Next up, we are doing 1/2 cup of sugar. Dump that in there. There's not a lot of ceremony. You just dump it in there and then you just pour this around. Don't worry about it. It's easy. This is actually a really easy cake. I know it looks fantastically weird that it cooks its own sauce, but it's fine. Then you are going to do 2.5 teaspoons of baking powder, which I don't think I have. I do not. I have to get the baking powder. I do not have baking powder. Where is the baking powder is the biggest question. Here it is. Okay. Because I do not appear to have baking powder in front of me. No, I don't think I do. No. So what I want is 1/2 teaspoon or whatever. It doesn't matter. But we are doing 2.5 teaspoons of baking powder, not baking soda. Okay, baking powder. Talk about the difference between baking powder and baking soda probably later because somebody asked, and I think it's one of the questions I have saved from a previous week. So, baking soda, baking powder, not baking soda, baking powder. Mix that in. Okay, there we go. Now we're going to do 1/4 teaspoon of salt. We don't need very much, okay? Just a little bit of salt. It's not really a big deal. A little bit of salt. Mix that in. Yay. Okay. Mix that in. A little bit of salt. Now we are going to add 1/4 cup of milk. And then we are going to add what amounts to about 1 teaspoon of vanilla. You can add a little bit more if you want. You don't have to. Mix that in. Okay? Yeah, temperature's dropping outside. It might rain. Oh my God, I would love it if it rained. For anyone unaware, we are in a state of emergency right now because of the wildfires. So it would not hurt anything if we had a little bit of rain. It would be great if we did. I would really like if we did. Okay, mix that until you're going to have this really stiff batter, and it's not going to look right. Okay? That's what the batter's going to look like. It doesn't look right. It's fine. I know it doesn't look right. Chocolate pudding cake is one of those things. It does not look right. I promise it's okay. All right? You're going to have this really thick batter. So kind of just try to make it as smooth as you can. It's not going to be perfectly smooth because it's freaking thick. But that's okay. It's supposed to be thick. Now we need 3 tablespoons of melted butter. And I'm going to use a different mixie utensil. It doesn't matter which mixie utensil. You can use wooden spoons. You can use the silicone spatulas. It doesn't matter. But to our butter, we're going to add about 3 tablespoons of cocoa and give that a nice little mix. Okay. Or you could spill it all over the counter like I just did. You can do that. And we are going to mix that up. You want that cocoa powder dissolved in the butter. So you can just spill it all over the counter because I'm good at that. When in doubt, just spill it all over the counter. It's fine. Give that a mix. Once that's pretty smooth, now you don't want your butter like hot, but you do want it still warm enough to dissolve that cocoa powder. So that's pretty smooth. Okay. Now we are going to add that into our batter. Okay, make sure you mix that cocoa powder into the butter first. If you try and mix the cocoa powder into the stiff batter, you're not going to like what happens, because what happens is the cocoa powder won't dissolve. Okay, mix it in the butter first. Okay, now we're going to mix all of this together. Okay, your batter's still going to be fairly stiff. Okay, it'll be a little more loosened up because of the butter, but it is still going to be stiff. That's okay. It's okay for it to still be stiff. I'll show it to you in a second. You don't want it looking too marbly, but if there's a couple of marble swirls in there, it's not the biggest deal. Okay, it's really not a problem. And yes, that's my dad in the background. Yes, it is. So there we go. So if there's a little bit of marbling, it's fine. Okay, a little bit of marbling is fine, but generally you want it mixed pretty smooth. Okay, it's still going to be thick as heck. That's okay. Now we want, you can either use chocolate chips or you can be chopping up some bittersweet chocolate, whatever you like. Not a ton. You know, you're looking at like a 1/4 cup or so. You're not looking at a ton. Okay, it's a fly. Don't like flies. And you're mixing that into the batter as well. Make it extra chocolatey. You could change up the chocolate chips and you could use white chocolate chips. You could use a peanut butter chocolate chip. You could try a mint chocolate chip. That could be fun. Whatever you like. It doesn't matter. Okay. After we're done that, everything needs to go into our dish. We don't need that bowl anymore. So we have our pre-sprayed dish, and we are going to scrape all of this into there. Okay. Now remember, this is not your typical cake batter. It's going to be really thick. That's okay. Thick is fine. We like thick. Thick is good for this. If it's too thin, so I know there's a tendency when people are making this, I'm just getting rid of this bowl. I don't need it. But there's a tendency, cake batter on my hand, for people to want to add more milk or some water or something. Don't do that. It is really tempting, I know. Okay? Maybe some of the butter that I made a mess of, scoop that up. But it's really tempting, I know, because what you're sitting with is something like this, right? That's what you're sitting with. It's really thick, really not necessarily what you thought it might be. And so what a lot of people do is they go, that's too thick. And they add a little bit of milk or they add a little bit of water until they have basically what you would assume would be a cake batter. But the problem is if you have a batter like that, when you pour the water on, it's just going to mix into the batter. If you have a typical cake batter, it's not going to turn into a chocolate pudding cake. So you smash it down like that, and you end up with a nice, it doesn't matter if the top's not completely flat, but you end up with that. Okay? We're good. we're good. We're good, we're good, we're good. We need to pour it into our dish, kind of smooth it out with our rubber spatula. And now we need to move on to making the sauce, okay? It's thick. That's normal. It's fine. So in a bowl, we are going to combine a 1/4 cup of sugar with a 1/4 cup of white sugar. And I'm just going to use my same spatula because literally it doesn't matter. Smash, 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 smash. Okay? And then we're going to add to that about 2 tablespoons of cocoa. Okay? 2 tablespoons of cocoa. Mix that together. Mix it. It's going to be crumbly. It's fine. It doesn't have to be perfect. Okay? It does not have to be perfect. Okay. So you're just mixing your 2 sugars, your brown sugar, your white sugar, and you're adding, there's a fly that I hate. I want to kill him. I don't have a fly swatter. I don't like him. It's summer and there's the occasional fly. And it's driving me nuts. Anyway, so you just want your 2 sugars and your cocoa powder. So basically you have a chocolate powder. Take that chocolate powder and sprinkle it in its entirety on top of the cake. Okay? Get rid of that bowl. You don't need it. If you see any like hunks of sugar, break them up. Kind of move that around until it's fairly smooth. What do you need next? You need 1 cup of cold water. So we want it tap cold. Okay? We want it tap cold. So I'm just making sure it's very cold. You want it very, 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 very cold. Just going to rinse the milk out. Okay, a little too much there. Okay, 1 cup of nice cold water, not ice water, okay? You're not looking at ice water, you're just looking at nice cold water. Be very gentle and pour this in its entirety on top of the cake. And I know it's tempting to mix it in. Don't. I know you're like, that can't possibly work. That's not going to be okay. Oh my God. And you're going to want to grab your thing and don't do it. Leave it alone. Okay? Trust the process. Do not stir it. Trust the process. I'm going to throw this in the oven. And by throw, I mean gently place it in the oven. And we are going to leave it there for 25 to 30 minutes. Okay? Don't open the oven for 25 minutes. Close that. We are going to set the timer for 25 minutes and walk away. Okay? Don't open the oven. It's going to take 25 to 30 minutes. Don't open the oven. Don't do it. Just ignore it. It's fine. It'll be bubbling and kind of have a slightly like a glazed top when it's done. And until it's done, we're not opening that. So while we wait for our 25 to 30 minutes for that to be cooked, well, that's a nice breeze coming in. I hope it rains, which has nothing to do with today's live stream, but if it would rain, that would be like fantastic, but it's not raining. All right, never mind. Cake is in the oven. Now we've got about 25 to 30 minutes to hang out, chat, talk all things baking, homesteading, kitchen magic. If you got a question, now's the time to pop it in the chat. If you can't make this time, and I know there's a heck of a lot of you who watch it later in the day, that is okay. You're allowed to watch it later in the day. Just send me your questions on Facebook or through YouTube comments on any of the videos, and I will gather them up and answer them next time. Okay. So what we are going to do today, I have a whole bunch of questions that I did not answer before. So I'm going to go through and answer them. In fact, last week I had to stop because I had things to do and I hadn't finished answering all my questions. So we will answer mostly kitchen-related questions, sliding in a couple other questions as time allows, because again, I am time limited today. I am usually time limited on Fridays, so I can't hang out endlessly. I have my questions here on my e-reader. Thank you to the viewer who taught me how to sideload things onto my e-reader. I'm not that tech savvy. All right. Questions. Somebody wanted to know when they found out we were doing a pudding cake, what makes pudding cakes different than other cakes? So pudding cakes have a built-in sauce. That layer is created during baking, like you just saw. Like we added the water on top and did not mix it in. The batter separates, the cake rises because of the baking powder, and the sauce sinks. It's part science, part magic. And that's why the proportions and the thickness of the batter are so important. Because if it's not thick enough, all of that stuff just kind of molds together and it'll just be a fudgy cake. People are sending me messages. Fun. I'm going to ignore the messages. Can I use a different chocolate in this recipe? Yes. Bittersweet chocolate is traditional, but you could switch it up and do milk chocolate chips, dark chocolate chips, white chocolate chips, peanut butter, mint, whatever chocolate morsel you want to put in. You could also sub it out for nuts if you wanted. It depends on your preferences. Like if you really don't like bittersweet chocolate, you might want to go with something lighter like a milk chocolate. There are a lot of ways you can customize this recipe simply by switching up the chocolate. And yes, there's more butter on the counter. Thank you. There's more butter on the counter. What happens if you stir the water into the batter? It simply won't layer properly. It's just not going to turn into chocolate pudding cake. What will happen is basically it'll all just turn into a fudgy cake because the magic is in letting the water sit on top. It sinks and forms that pudding layer, okay? And that pudding layer forms underneath during baking. So when you scoop it out with your spoon, it's absolutely fantastic, okay? And it is fantastic. It's one of the few cakes I just truly enjoy. What kind of dish works best for this kind of recipe? So I'm using a glass-bottomed dish, and the reason I'm using that is I like pans that slope a little bit on the sides. Something that has those rounded bottoms is a little more ideal. You can use just your standard square cake pans that don't have that kind of gentle slope, but you might get less sauce around the edges. So I kind of like the rounded bottom because it kind of keeps that sauce saucy. Can you double this recipe? You can. However, I would keep it in 2 different dishes. I wouldn't try to bake one big chocolate pudding cake because it won't cook evenly. Chocolate pudding cakes are best baked in smaller pans because they get even heat distribution. Nice square or round pans work best. What's the best cocoa powder to use? Use unsweetened natural cocoa. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Dutch process works best, but it can alter and slightly, like rise slightly due to the pH, like it changes it a little bit. So I like Dutch process, but it does change the way it rises a little bit because of the pH difference. It doesn't really matter. So, I mean, natural unsweetened cocoa is perfectly fine, or whatever you have in your cupboard. Don't go find something specific if you don't need it. So whatever cocoa powder you have in your cupboard is fine. If you're shopping for cocoa powder, just go natural unsweetened. Can I make this gluten-free? Yes, if you use a good gluten-free flour. I like the Bob's Red Mill Blue Bag because I do have a sister who has celiac, so sometimes I have to make gluten-free things for her. You also might need to increase your baking powder by an extra teaspoon just to get that oomph. Okay, it should still taste fine. The thing is, because the defining flavor is all the chocolate, you're not tasting as much of the flour in this recipe. So if you do need to make it gluten-free, just do a 1-to-1 substitution with a really good flour. Again, Bob's Red Mill, the blue bag, is what I found works best. Is this recipe freezer friendly? Not really. You should make it and serve it warm. That's when it's best. You can store leftovers in the fridge and reheat, but actually freezing it affects the texture. So I would not freeze this particular cake. It's a small cake, so you probably won't need to find yourself freezing it. You probably should just make it fresh. What are your favorite chocolate-based desserts, aside from chocolate pudding cake, I'm assuming? I like chocolate mousse a lot. I'm not huge on sweets a lot of the times. So when people ask me for my favorite dessert, I'm often like, But I do like chocolate mousse. And I like homemade brownies. I like making brownies from scratch. They're pretty good. What's the difference between baking soda and baking powder? Baking soda needs acid to activate. Baking powder already includes the acid. In this recipe, we used baking powder because there's no acid. You'll notice there was no vinegar or anything in our batter. So we need to use baking powder, not soda. Can I add nuts and other mix-ins? Yeah, go ahead. Walnuts, pecans, raspberries, blueberries, whatever you like with chocolate, it should go great in this. Okay, just don't overload it. Like if you put way too many things in the batter, the chocolate sauce layer won't form properly. Why is homestead cooking different than regular cooking? Homestead cooking tends to be a little more ingredient conscious. You know, you grow or raise a lot of your own food, so meals tend to be tied to what's seasonal, fresh, or available. That doesn't mean homesteaders don't hit up the supermarket and go, you know what, I just really want some cauliflower, even though it's totally out of season. Yeah, so it's fine. You can still go to the grocery store as a homesteader. You probably will, because the chances that you're going to grow everything you can eat and everything your family can eat on just your homestead is fairly low, but it'll at least alleviate some of the burden of having to buy groceries. What is your go-to tool that you can't live without in the kitchen? A sturdy silicone spatula. These guys are fantastic. I could talk about mixing bowls. I could talk about a good measuring cup, but really a good silicone spatula. It will make your life so much easier. It's so easy to scrape out bowls, and you need something that's really sturdy. Like this is sturdy both in its handle and the blade. If you get something, so we have other ones that are not necessarily fantastic. So you might get something like this. I'm going to sneeze. Sorry. But if you get something like this one's really flexible. I don't like that much give. So if you're going to get a silicone spatula, you want something that is quite robust so that when you are scraping out bowls, it doesn't bend too much. Okay. How do you get that perfect gooey texture in the chocolate pudding cake? Don't open the oven for the first 25 minutes. Leave it alone. That's why I'm watching the timer. We're down to 15 minutes. Leave it alone. And don't overbake it. If it's done at 25 minutes, take it out. Okay? If it's done, take it out. I'm just looking for my heat pads. I don't seem to have my heat pads. That's not good. Tristan, do you have my heat pads? He stole my heat pads. He's a heat pad thief. I think he stole my heat pads. Stole my heat pads. Stole my heat pads. That's what happens. People steal your heat pads, and then you're not going to be able to take things out of the oven. People steal your, there we go. I can quit complaining about stealing my heat pads now. That's the way it goes. You complain about the stealing of the heat pads until it comes back. Anyway, really you want to pull the chocolate pudding cake as soon as the top looks set, but it should still jiggle a little bit because there's sauce, right? It shouldn't be totally set. It should look set, but still jiggle. So you don't want to overbake it. If you overbake it, that's no good. If you overbake, it's just not going to work. And you do need to let it cool for 5 minutes. Don't just like, blah, 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 because that sauce forms as it cools a little bit. Can it be made dairy-free? Somebody asked. Technically, yes. Swap like a soy milk or an almond milk or an oat milk for the milk and like a plant butter for the butter. You still need those two ingredients, but it'll swap just fine. Use a plant-based butter and you'll be okay. And you can also use dairy-free chocolate. I think that would make it dairy-free. I'm just thinking that's the milk, the chocolate, and the butter. If you subbed out those 3 ingredients for dairy-free versions, yep, it should still work. Somebody asked me, what kind of chocolate do you grow on the homestead? We don't. Okay. So while growing chocolate sounds like a lot of fun, most of us are going to live in a climate where you simply can't grow cocoa. You can't grow chocolate. It's not going to work. Unless you live in the tropics, it's not going to happen. Wouldn't that be amazing if we could, though? That would be great if we could plant chocolate. But we can't. Cocoa beans is where you get your chocolate from. Can't grow it here. We are so far north, we're lucky we can grow anything at all. But that's a funny question. What are your favorite ingredients to bake with? I like cooking with my farm eggs. Honey. I like cooking with honey. I really like baking with fresh herbs. So making scones and stuff that have a lot of fresh herbs is really nice. Fresh tomatoes from the garden. I like using those. Pretty much anything fresh from the garden. Pretty much anything fresh from the garden I enjoy. How do you store cocoa powder so it doesn't go stale? You really want it in a tightly sealed container in a cool, dry place. You don't want to leave it out in the sun because that'll get really hot. So just nice, tightly stored in an airtight container. Put it in your cupboard. It'll be fine. Can you use honey instead of sugar in this? No, because the sugar is necessary to form that sauce. So the sugar mix we poured on top before we poured the water, you actually require that. So no, this is one of those few times where I'll tell you, no, you actually do need to go get sugar. Honey's not going to cut it. It will not form the proper sauce. Do you ever mill your own flour? I have, as an experiment a couple of times, a few years back. It's not something I will do very often. I'm going to be honest. Fresh milled flour has amazing flavor, but it does bake differently. And higher protein content means like denser cakes, and you have to adjust a lot. And frankly, all the flour we get here is locally grown wheat anyway, and it's locally milled because we're a high wheat producing area. So I don't really see the point in milling my own wheat. I did it so that I would know how. I don't feel the need to do it very often. Can I use hot water instead of cold in this recipe? No. There's a reason I was very specific about it being cold water, not ice water, but very cold. The cold water slows the batter's rise and helps that sauce layer form at the right time. Hot water will speed up the bake, and you don't want that. So it has to be cold. Do you use a convection oven or a regular oven? Regular oven. A convection oven tends to dry out cakes, especially chocolate pudding cakes, a little bit too fast unless you adjust the temp and time. So generally, just use your regular oven for pudding cakes. What's your favorite farm-to-table dessert overall? My favorite dessert? Probably berries with cream, I'm going to be honest. Berries with cream, man. That's just fresh picked berries off the plants. Throw it into some fresh cream. Man, you can't beat it. Any tips for beginners trying this recipe for the first time? Don't get scared. Don't get scared. I know it's intimidating, and I know the batter looks way too thick. I know that. But it's fine. Okay? Don't overthink it. Follow the steps. Trust the method. Put it in the oven. Wait. Okay? My recommendation is simply to trust the process because it does not look right. I will admit that. Your cake batter looks too thick, and then you've got water floating on top, and you're like, ah, trust the process. What's a fun twist to this recipe? Try adding espresso powder. That could be cool. A little bit of espresso powder to the batter for like a mocha pudding cake. That could be fun. What do you serve this with? I like to serve it with ice cream, vanilla ice cream. You can serve it with whipped cream or whatever you like. Sometimes I just eat it. I do like chocolate pudding cake. Sometimes you just eat it. Can you have this recipe? If you have a smaller dish, yes. So you could maybe bake it in a bread pan if you half the recipe. You don't want to half the recipe and not reduce the size of the dish because that thickness of the batter is actually really important. It is important that the ratio between how thick the batter is and how thick that water layer on top is fairly consistent. Otherwise, it just won't sauce right. Why do you think homestead style baking is coming back into style? Honestly, I think it's because, one, people don't want to leave their homes anymore, and it's a good reason to stay home. But also because people want connection, real food, real ingredients, a sense of home, stuff like that. Plus, it tastes so good and it's fun. So between all those reasons, yeah, there's a rise in interest in home baking and homestead cooking. I think the pandemic started it, but once you start something, sometimes you can't turn it off. And now there's so many people pursuing baking at home, at least in a basic function. So yeah, it's good. What's the best way to clean burnt on pudding sauce? Soak it in hot soapy water for a while. Just, just let it soak. It'll eventually soak off. Just fill it with water and ignore it. That's what I do. I don't scrub. If something is scrubbable, if I would need scrubbing to come off, I just fill the thing with water and walk away. Do your animals ever get kitchen scraps? Yes. Of course they do. Anyone who's watched some of our videos will notice that Tequila helps herself to my food all the time. But the goats get their veggie peels, and chickens get the bread ends, and Shadowfax gets the apple cores or the corn, all that good stuff. The dogs get the dairy and the meat, and so the cats, they share that. Yeah, we're not into wasting our kitchen scraps, right? We would like to make sure that we don't waste anything. What's one baking mistake you made when starting out? I'm just going to grab a chair. But what's one baking mistake I made when I was starting out? Here's my gloves. Yay. Okay, so one of the baking mistakes a lot of people make, I'm just grabbing a chair, by the way, and knocking things on the floor. But one of the mistakes people make over and over and over again is over mixing. Okay, it's really easy to decide that's not mixed enough and to mix it, and then to mix it more, and then to mix it more than that. Okay, it's probably the most common thing people do. You know, you hear the don't overmix your cookie dough, and then you overmix your cookie dough because you don't think it's mixed well enough. You don't think you did enough. That's probably the thing that I did a lot of. I used to overstir everything. Now, overmixed cakes are really sad. Overmixed biscuits don't flake. Overmixed breads are usually okay because you're developing gluten anyway. But yeah, be gentle. Don't overmix. How do you involve your kids in homestead baking? Depends on the age. When they were little, cracking eggs, as long as you're prepared for the eggs to be horribly cracked every time, which is fine. I can't crack eggs either. But cracking eggs, stirring the batter, helping portion things into like muffin cups and stuff like that, getting their suggestions on what to put in stuff. Just get them involved. The older they get, like we're at the point now where Tristan, he handles pizza night, and he makes pizza sauce to put on his pizzas, and Rowan is frequently cooking up a storm. Rowan likes to make muffins. If you start out right and you get the kids involved young, you're going to end up with teenagers and then young adults who are not afraid to sit down and start cooking. And sitting down and starting cooking is an important skill. Boys or girls, it doesn't matter. Okay, boys or girls, whether you are a mom or a dad, it doesn't matter. Teach your kids to cook. Get them involved with baking and cooking as young as you possibly can. How do you keep a rustic kitchen organized? Does that look organized? It's not. And there's also a pile of dishes. It's not organized. Okay, to be fair, everything is labeled. Okay? And I know where everything is. Even the stuff that's literally everywhere. It's not always pretty, but I know where everything is. Like, I know exactly where the cocoa powder is, even though it's not where it's supposed to be, but it's in the spot, and I know where that spot is. So it's fine. Can this recipe be made in a cast iron skillet? I'm tempted to say no, because you're going to have to make some adjustments, but technically yes. As long as it's deep enough, and as long as you adjust the time, because it's going to cook a little bit faster because of the cast iron. So I would generally say the first time you're making it, don't use cast iron. The second or third time, sure, experiment a little bit. But at the beginning, I wouldn't. I would just leave it. How do you keep ingredients fresh on the homestead? Lots of airtight containers, freezing what you can, and use everything in rotation to prevent waste. So we've all been there where you open up a new thing of baking powder and then you find the old thing of baking powder. The best thing you could do is keep track or put unopened things in a different spot. So then if I legitimately can't find any baking powder, I know it's time to open a new one. But it's about storing things in airtight containers, being willing to freeze. Canning, sure. I'm not the biggest fan of canned. I like canning. I like the process of canning. I'm not the biggest fan of most canned foods, to be honest. I don't mind canned salsas and sauces and jams and stuff. That's fine. But I don't like canned vegetables. No, they're not for me. So I don't love canning. But we do resort to a lot of freezing. We do a lot of dehydrating, a lot of airtight containers, and just making sure we're using up the oldest product first. So the cake is just about done. We've got about another minute, and I'm actually really tired, and I got so much to do this afternoon. That has been funny. I have so much. My Fridays are very, very busy. Why did I pick Friday to live stream? I don't know. It seemed like a good idea. It's a terrible idea, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. So, a lot to do tonight. We do have quite a lot of wildfire smoke. All we're doing is hoping it rains. Like, that's where we're at. There's a state of emergency in our province. A lot of people have been evacuated. I'm hitting a microphone with my arm as I wait for the buzzer to go. There's a lot of wildfire smoke everywhere. And we're back to just praying for rain. That's what we're doing. We're just praying that it rains because it's been too hot, too dry, and no rain. And things are on fire. And evacuees are heading back to Winnipeg. So, second time this year they've all been evacuated, and it sucks. So, what are you going to do? There goes the first buzzer. Now we check. We check to see if it's done. It actually is. Okay, we're going to put our gloves on. We're going to turn off the oven. Put our gloves on. Wear your gloves. If you're anything like me, you forget to wear your gloves. Okay, so it should still be jiggly. Okay, it should still jiggle, 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 jiggle. It's normal. Okay, now we're going to set a 5-minute timer, and we are going to let it cool. Don't touch it yet. Okay, so how do I know it's done baking? Okay, so first of all, it's got kind of this crusty top with some jiggle in the middle. Jiggle is essential. That really didn't come out the way I intended, but apparently jiggle is essential to all of life now. Shh. You can see around the edges, the cake has started to pull away from the sides, okay? And it shouldn't be stuck to the sides anyway because you greased your pan, right? You remember to grease your pan like we did at the very beginning? You greased your pan. You can grease your pan using cooking spray. You can use cake goop. You can use the butter flour trick. It doesn't matter. But you need to grease your pan somehow so it doesn't stick because this is a sticky cake. You should be able to just take your finger and kind of pull the sides away. And you'll know that it's not stuck because it's not sticking. So it's done because it's kind of got a crackly top. It's kind of got a pudding center. And it's piping hot. It's hot. The edges are firm. We're just going to wait out our 5 minutes. And remember, this is a pudding cake. It is cooked. I promise. It has a sauce built into it. There's a saucy layer right in this thing. Okay? I will show you when I scoop it out. But right now, we're literally waiting. We have 3 more minutes. Let it sit. Okay? Just let it sit. You don't want to wreck it now. Don't get excited and start scooping. Okay? So it's supposed to have a nice thick sauce. The longer it sits, the thicker that sauce will get. So I don't want to get up. I don't want to get up. I'm not getting up. I need a spoon to scoop it, but I don't want to get up right now. It's because I'm very tired. I have not been sleeping well. It's the smoke. There's a lot of smoke. And you do what you can, but at some point, like now we have the windows open because you've got to let the smoke back out. It gets in the house at some point, no matter what you do. You try your best. You do the wet towel around the doors and things like that. You do your very best. But at some point, you're like, now it's stifling in here and smoky. Awesome. So you just open everything back up and you just go with it. There comes a point in which you don't care anymore because that's the way it goes. Anyway, don't worry about it. Anyway, we're just waiting for that timer to go off. And I do have to go pretty soon. I'm just looking at the time. It's almost 3 o'clock my time, and I do have to go pretty soon. That's why I live stream early in the day, because we have stuff to do on Fridays. I should have picked a different day, but I like Friday. Because it feels like the end of the week. It is the end of the week, and we all get to just, go do stuff. Weekends tend to be pretty quiet around here. And you'll notice as it's sitting, it gets less jiggly. Okay, so like when I shake it now, it's not as jiggly as it was 3 minutes ago. So as it sits, it gets less jiggly. That's good, right? And it's also allowing the center to finish cooking. But it is cooked. You just want to let it finish for a couple minutes. But that's what's going on right now. We're just waiting. Waiting. And then we're going to get a bowl. And we're going to get a bowl and a spoon, and we're going to scoop, and we're going to take a look at it. And I'm pretty excited for this. I like chocolate pudding cake. It's very good. I enjoy it. So I'm just going to stare at it. That's a really nice breeze coming in that window. It's nice. I'm just going to stare at it till it's done. I really should blow my nose, which I know has nothing to do with baking. But I'm going to go blow my nose for a second and then clean my hands off. Because you don't blow your nose and then handle food. Don't do that. You do not do that. If you do that, that's gross. Don't do that. So we're going to blow our nose. Sorry. Here and clean our hands. Here's my cloth for drying hands. Where did it go? Oh, it's over here. Okay, I found it. Okay. Now we need a bowl. Do I even have a nice bowl? I'm going to use one of these. It's easier to see. It's easier to see if I use one of these dudes. Thank you. That's the timer telling me 5 minutes is up. Never have a spoon that I like, but this one's fine. Okay, so it's going to be saucy. You're going to cut into this. There's going to be like, it's supposed to. Okay, it doesn't. That's why you use a spoon. You don't use a knife. Use a spoon. Go scoop. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And there's sauce in there that will continue solidifying. That's your chocolate pudding cake. I took a little bit. So you see the sauce everywhere, but it is cooked. I know it's sometimes you're like, I don't know, is that cooked? It is, I promise. Anyway, we are going to call that quits because I need to go. I'm also not feeling great, but it is what it is. So the cake should be bubbling around the edges, slightly kind of glazy on top when you take it out of the oven. And it should smell amazing. Then you give it 5 minutes to cool. Then you can scoop some up for a taste test. Whether you're baking along or just hanging out for the cozy vibes, thank you for joining me here today for another In the Kitchen session at Andersen Acres. If you have a recipe suggestion for next time, drop them in the comments. I like hearing the ideas. I won't always pick your ideas, but I like to hear them. Anyway, that is about it for us here today at Andersen Acres, and we will see you tomorrow. And I'm going to try to turn this off without getting my finger in the camera, because I usually do.